You know, in our world, credibility is just everything. We've all got our resumes, our degrees, our references, all these pieces of paper to prove our worth. But what if the ultimate credential wasn't a piece of paper at all, but something way more profound? And we're going to dive into that very idea, looking at a 2,000-year-old letter from the Apostle Paul, written when he was facing a massive crisis of credibility in the ancient city of Corinth. Just think about it for a second. What really is the ultimate letter of recommendation? Is it a glowing review from some super important person, a diploma from a top-tier university? Just kind of hold that thought, because the Apostle Paul, he had a radically different answer. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in Corinth, this bustling, important city in the Roman Empire. Paul had actually founded the church there, but now he's being challenged by these rival preachers. They're basically showing up and asking, "Hey, Paul, where's your paperwork? Who gave you the authority to be here?" His entire credibility as an apostle was on the line.
And this gets us right to the heart of the conflict, a full-blown crisis of credibility. See, back in the ancient world, it was totally normal for traveling teachers to carry these formal letters of recommendation. You can think of it like their passport and their LinkedIn profile all rolled into one. A document from a recognized authority, say the church leaders back in Jerusalem, that vouched for them.
It's pretty likely that Paul's opponents rolled into Corinth with exactly these kinds of credentials. They had the formal letters, the right pedigrees, they had the paperwork to prove they were legit. Paul, on the other hand, shows up kind of empty-handed, and you can bet his critics were using that against him.
And this is Paul's fiery response. You can almost hear the tone in his voice, right? It's a rhetorical question, and the answer he expects is a loud and clear no. He's not just defending himself here, he is completely rejecting their entire system of validation. He's refusing to play their game, because he knows he has a credential that makes all their paper letters totally obsolete. So Paul doesn't just reject their standards, he flips the script and proposes a radically different one. His letter of recommendation is something they have never seen before. He calls it a living letter.
So here's the side-by-side comparison. His opponents have letters written with plain old ink on paper, signed by men. Paul says, nope, my letter is written by the very Spirit of God, not on stone tablets, but on actual human hearts. Theirs is lifeless and external, his is alive and internal. It's a total game changer.
And here it is. This is the absolute core of his argument. Paul points directly to the believers in Corinth and says, "You are my letter of recommendation. Your changed lives, your newfound faith, your total transformation, that is the undeniable proof of my ministry. And it's a public document, something for everyone to see, to be known and read by all."
And what's really cool is that this isn't just about a few individual success stories. Paul's language here is corporate. It's communal. He says, "You are our letter," singular. The entire community, living and worshiping together, they formed a single unified message that testified to the power of the gospel he preached. Their collective life was the real credential. Now, to really back up this incredibly bold claim, Paul goes deep into theology. He contrasts two massive biblical ideas, the Old Covenant, which is associated with Moses and the law, and the New Covenant, which was established through Christ. He's arguing that his entire ministry operates under this new and far superior system.
So let's look at how he breaks it down. The Old Covenant, based on the written law, or the letter, it was glorious for sure, but it ultimately led to condemnation because, well, nobody could perfectly keep it. But the New Covenant, that operates by the Spirit, and it leads to life and reconciliation with God. Its glory isn't temporary, it's permanent, and it's far greater. This is the logic behind his famous line, "The letter kills, but the Spirit gives life." To get a handle on this idea of surpassing glory, think of it like this. The Old Covenant's glory was like a candle. It gave off real light, no doubt about it. But the New Covenant, that's like flipping on a 100-watt light bulb. The candle is still lit, but its light just becomes insignificant in this new, overwhelming brightness.
Paul keeps this comparison going by introducing another powerful metaphor, this one drawn from the story of Moses, the idea of a veil. And this isn't just about glory anymore. It's about perception, about how we see and understand things.
Okay, so the veil comes from the story where Moses met with God on Mount Sinai. When he came down, his face was so radiant with God's glory that he had to cover it with a veil. Paul takes that image and uses it as a symbol for a kind of spiritual dullness, a hardening of the mind that keeps someone from truly getting God's message.
So Paul's point is that for a lot of people, even in his own day, when they read the Old Testament scriptures, that veil is still there. It kind of clouds their understanding. It prevents them from seeing how it all ultimately points towards Christ. It creates this kind of spiritual blindness.
But, and this is the big but, Paul offers the solution. He says the crucial action is turning to the Lord, meaning turning to Christ. And at that exact moment of turning, the veil is just taken away. And suddenly, what was confusing becomes clear. True understanding is finally possible.
Then Paul says something really famous. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. But what kind of freedom is he actually talking about? It's definitely not the freedom to just do whatever we want. It's something way more specific and way more profound.
The freedom that comes with the Spirit is actually threefold. It's a freedom from the power and bondage of sin, freedom from the finality of death, and freedom from the heavy burden of trying to earn your own righteousness through a checklist of rules. It's a liberation into a totally new way of living.
So in the end, Paul took what was a really personal attack on his character and turned it into this profound teaching on what authentic ministry and an authentic life really look like. And now, he kind of forces us to ask the same question of ourselves. What does our own letter say to the world?
So the result of living with that veil removed is a life of true freedom and clarity. But it doesn't even stop there. Paul says that by seeing God's glory clearly, we ourselves are progressively transformed into that very same image. It's this continuous, lifelong process where our character is being shaped to look more and more like God's.
This quote from the poet Annie Johnson Flint just perfectly captures the modern-day application of what Paul was arguing. In a world that might never pick up a Bible, our lives become the text. We become Christ's message, not just in what we say, but in everything we do.
And that brings us right back to the central question. Paul argued that the changed lives of the Corinthians were his ultimate credentials. So what about us? Your life, my life, it's a letter, and it's being read by everyone around you. What does it say?